In medieval Europe, danger did not always announce itself at the door. Sometimes it slipped in through the roof. Sometimes it waited in the night beyond the fields. And sometimes it already existed inside the very walls of the home. Picture this. You live in a single-room hut made of clay. There is no lock on the entrance, no clear window, no padding in the walls, no heating system, no source of light once darkness settles. Winter arrives. The wind slices through the walls like blades. You hear tiny claws in the darkness. Rats. You hear distant growls beyond the farmland. Wolves. You feel the cold stealing away your fire with every gust. You do not own metal. You do not have guards. You can spare no time to defend yourself. But you have straw. Only straw. Dry, fragile, ignored. Left after the crops are collected. Stepped on by everyone. Piled in corners. Fed to hungry livestock. Yet in everyday life, straw served far greater roles. It provided bedding. It gave insulation. It diverted attention. It offered protection. It brought warmth into the night. It stood between you and starvation. When all else failed, straw remained. In this story, we explore how peasants fought against the three major forces that threatened them. Rats that raided their food. Wolves that lurked at sunset. And the cold that seeped into every breath, all handled without special gear and without outside support, only with their own labor and the simple remains of harvest time. We will step through smoke-filled huts, through icy fields, through barns where animals and humans shared warmth side by side, through methods learned by ancestors when weapons were scarce and superstition gave no comfort. When the world pressed hard against them, they answered back with straw. Now the fire begins. Fire was not common. Wool was a luxury. But straw was everywhere. And when winter settled in, it became a shield around the body. In medieval Europe, cold did not stop at discomfort. It threatened life. Homes of common people had no insulation. Most were built from sticks weaving through mud. Thin walls that kept out little. No glass in the openings. Only fabric or wooden planks set loosely in place. The wind forced its way through every tiny gap. Snow found its way inside under every entrance. The single hearth was small, and always filling the room with smoke. The cold did not ask for permission. It sank into limbs, numbed hands, changed breath into visible clouds and fear. So how did families stay alive? They turned to straw. Straw was spread thick across the floor. It lifted bodies away from the frozen earth, soaked up dampness, and formed a soft base that kept warmth from escaping. Most peasants did not sleep in beds. They rested on straw beds they built themselves. Whole families lay together on layers of straw, covered with worn fabric, animal hides, or more straw. When animals were moved inside for warmth, chickens, goats, even pigs, they also rested on straw, and their presence added warmth for everyone. People even heated straw in the fire, then covered it up quickly before lying down. Small effort. But in winter, small amounts of heat meant survival. Poor villagers could not afford thick wool clothes, so they packed their garments with straw. Inside arms, inside footwear, inside cloaks. Straw was light. It held air inside. It confined heat and pushed away the cold. Children walked through snow with straw inside their shoes. Older people wrapped their legs in braided straw for warmth. In barns, they even built full straw partitions, not for appearance, but to trap heat and create a barrier around the family and their animals. One fire, One shelter, one group of people, all surrounded by straw and making it through each freezing night. Straw was always present. They placed it in layers. They moved the top layer aside each day so the lower layers could dry. They slept within it, hid beneath it, wrapped infants in it, and sometimes they burned it for a brief spark of warmth. Just one armful at a time. In a world filled with towering fortresses and fine fur clothing, common folk possessed none of that. They had straw, and they used it like a defense. But the brutal cold was not the only threat. There were creatures that crawled under darkness, that gnawed, that squealed, that cut through fabric and crept into dreams. Once again, straw stood between security and sickness. Rats never waited politely. They chewed through cloth, through woven baskets, through stillness. When they reached your home, they brought hunger along with them. In the medieval world, rats were a greater menace than wolves. Wolves stalked now and then, but rats invaded every night. They found their way into storage, shredded rope, nested in hay, and consumed the very food that farmers spent months gathering. Grain, dried meat, next season's seed, all ruined by morning or tainted. A single dead rat inside a container of flour could cause disease or even kill. Villagers had no metal traps, no poison, no solid crates. But they had straw, and they understood how to turn it into a tool. Straw was soft and cozy. Rats loved to burrow in it. So people turned that comfort into a threat. They put straw bundles in dark corners where rats crawled. Inside these bundles, they concealed sharp stones, spiky twigs, or broken fish bones. When rats pushed inside, they were injured. They ran away or they died. It was not a graceful solution, but it worked. Some villagers soaked straw, mixed it with fermented grain, and placed it near their food stores. A lure that distracted rats from the real supplies. At night, when silence filled the home, villagers scattered loose straw across their floors. Dry straw crackled at the slightest movement. Even a tiny footstep produced noise. In a home with no lanterns, no alarms, and no guards, that sound could protect a family. Parents stirred. Children yelled. Dogs barked. And the rats fled. Knowledge passed through generations. Straw bundles filled with crushed garlic. Straw tied with dried mint tucked beside storage. Sage leaves twisted into the corners with string and straw. People learned that certain odors made rats avoid an area. They lacked formal study, but they watched nature and paid attention. They rubbed containers with garlic, vinegar, bitter plants, and black soot from the hearth, then packed their baskets and shelves with straw lining. The result? Not absolute safety, but enough to reduce the danger. When they hid food in pits or jars, they wrapped it in thick layers of straw to protect it. Inside clay vessels, a soft layer of straw. Inside woven baskets, food at the center, and straw surrounding it like a cushion. Inside hidden ground pits, supplies sealed inside straw bundles, buried deep below. Straw served three purposes. First, it absorbed smells, so pests could not easily trace food. Second, it created a barrier that was difficult to chew through and slowed intruders. Third, it created a delay, giving a few extra moments to hear noises and respond before the damage was done. Sometimes provisions were wrapped entirely in straw, covered in ash, and buried underground so nothing could find them. Peasants did not throw straw around carelessly. They practiced a familiar routine, a kind of village science. An old farmer might insist that a sack of grain needed a circle of straw and garlic around it. Another might claim that a small doll of straw soaked in vinegar should hang above the pantry. Straw turned into a language of survival. From cooking spaces to dark corners near the wall, from clay pots to animal sheds, from wrinkled hands to the fingers of children, straw stood watch. And the struggle did not stop inside the home. Outside, the forest pressed close and deep snow concealed dangers. Other hunters waited in silence. Straw followed peasants there as well. Wolves were not myths. They walked the same ground. When winter thickened, when rivers became ice and wild prey vanished, wolves came nearer. To the fields, to the henhouse, to the stables, right up to the window. They called out in the night. They watched. They sought more than any single creature. They sought weakness. And common folk had no strong walls, no iron weapons, no blazing lanterns to clear the dark. They only knew that wolves feared flame. Yet firewood was precious. So peasants tied straw into long bundles, soaked them in animal fat, lit them at sunset, and placed them along paths near the pens. Some formed a ring of straw bundles around their animals. If wolves crept close, every torch ignited at once. Bright light and noise startled the pack. It burned quickly, but sometimes that short burst was all that was needed. In a world ruled by instinct, hesitation could mean victory. Another tactic waited in the fields. Figures built of straw, the size of a person. Not for birds this time, but for wolves. Peasants dressed these figures in worn clothes, covered them with sharp scents like ash or dung, and set them near the barn. A hungry wolf paid attention to shape and smell and the idea of a watching presence. If it assumed someone stood guard, it might retreat. Peasants laid straw mats lined with broken metal scraps, thorn branches, or sharp bones at the places where wolves always passed. Behind the barn, near the pen, under windows. When a wolf stepped onto that hidden trap, its paw bled, it limped, and it fled. It did not always stop the pack completely, but it might protect one sheep, one cow, one precious source of food for winter. And that was sometimes all a family needed to live. Bolder villagers did more than defend. They fooled the predators. They used straw to hide the scent trail of animals, crafted false nests with clumps of old fur, and spread misleading tracks that led wolves to abandoned sheds or empty ravines. Once inside, the animals found nothing, and the people earned another night of rest. Wolves possessed cunning, but peasants had necessity, and necessity sharpens the mind. A simple bundle of straw, a pinch of ash, and a few bones could serve as a fire signal, a silent guard, or a clever trap. These methods were not found in written guides. They traveled by stories, from one household to the next, from one freezing night to another. Straw never snarled or clawed or hunted, yet it kept the wild at bay, sometimes for a single night, sometimes for the whole season. Straw was not only a shield or a barrier. It was also a helper in daily living, a surface to kneel on, a cover to keep things clean, a support for every task. Now we can look at its quieter side, the simple ways straw allowed life to continue in the deepest part of winter. In a peasant home, every object had a purpose. There was no room for decoration or comfort. There was only the struggle to endure. Everything in a peasant home served a purpose, and straw served countless needs. It was not only something to sleep on, not only a barrier against the cold, not only a tool to drive away rodents or keep away prowling animals. Straw was the fabric of daily survival, folded, stacked, woven, stuffed in every space where it could help. It changed to fit every task. If one layer felt too thin, they added another. If moisture crept in, they replaced it. If filth gathered, they tossed the old straw into the fire and laid fresh stalks across the ground like scattered gold. First, the floor beneath their feet. In many villages, there were no wooden planks, only hard earth that could turn damp and uneven. To solve this, people spread thick layers of straw over the ground, crossing the stalks again and again. This kept mud under control, absorbed dirt, made walking quieter, and softened the constant chill. It turned the harsh earth into a kind of living carpet. Some scattered bits of meadowsweet or thyme among the straw to add comfort to the air and deter insects. Second, the places they rested. Beds for the wealthy did not exist here. Instead, Linen bags filled with straw created resting pads and pillows for everyone. Adults and children slept close together, with straw cushions between them and the cold soil. In the warm months, freshly cut straw cooled the skin. When winter came, older straw that had grown softer was packed thicker for warmth. When a child entered the world, the first place it slept was often a basket lined with the softest straw the family could gather. That tiny cradle of stalks kept the newborn from the cold floor and offered a gentle surface to rest on. Straw also belonged in the kitchen. It lined baskets holding food, wrapped fragile cheese, and protected pottery jars. When baking bread, cooks sometimes arranged straw beneath round loaves so they would not scorch. They even steamed some meals in straw to keep flavors rich and flesh tender. In times of hardship, straw became an ingredient as well. They dried it, ground it, sifted it, and mixed it with barley or oat flour. It did not taste pleasant, but it kept the dough together and created one more piece of food when supplies dwindled. Straw was the peasant version of protective packing. It guarded eggs in baskets, cushioned jars traveling across fields, and shielded stored seeds until spring. Dried apples, onions, and fish were wrapped in tight straw bundles and tied with twine, marked with a small sign and hung high from rafters. A well-prepared bundle could keep beans safe all winter long. When a family needed to leave their home and travel to another village, they sometimes carried their cleanest, driest straw with them. In a new place, that bundle might become the first bed, the first cushion under a weary body, or the first layer spread beneath a newborn child. Straw arrived at harvest time and remained all year. It became bedding, kindling, wrapping for food, and protection against pests. It lay beneath newborn bodies and was set aflame beneath the sick when fever rose. It was the quiet helper in every corner of life. When a person passed away, their body was often wrapped gently in straw, carried to the churchyard, and buried with the same humble material that had supported their life. Straw did not shine. It did not appear in legends of glory. Yet it was loyal, always present, always ready to serve. Now we turn to its deeper meaning, the role it played in village customs, beliefs, and quiet hopes. For in a harsh world, peasants did more than use straw. They believed in it. To some, straw might seem plain. But in the medieval countryside, it held a touch of the sacred. It started as something beneath the feet, beneath the body, beneath the cold. Gradually, though, it took on symbolism. Because when a simple material is there at every beginning, throughout every winter, and at every final farewell, it cannot remain ordinary. It becomes part of prayer. First, straw inside holy places. In many churches, straw was spread across the floor for winter festivals and religious celebrations. It warmed the ground, softened noise, and showed that the day was special. On Christmas Eve, families would bring a clean bundle of straw to the altar, representing the bedding of the infant Christ. It was not luxurious, but to the villagers, this was the closest they could come to honoring a sacred cradle. Second, figures made of straw to offer protection. Life in the countryside was filled with worry. Fear of sickness, of hunger, of storms, of animals in the night. People crafted small shapes from straw. Some resembled people, others looked like birds or cattle. They were tied with red thread, sprinkled with ash, and hung from beams or doors. These little guards were believed to protect the home, keep pests away, help the fields grow strong, and draw illness out of a suffering body. When a person recovered, the family often burned the straw figure, believing it had carried the sickness away. Third, braided charms and harvest blessings. Straw was not only scattered loose, it was woven into careful forms during harvest season. Cross shapes hung in kitchens, twisted rings placed on livestock, crowns worn during gatherings that honored the end of reaping. One cherished custom was to take the final sheaf of straw and shape it into a spirit of the grain, kept safe indoors through winter. It symbolized the life of the fields, a promise that spring would return, straw as a guardian against misfortune. People tucked straw in cradles to protect babies from unseen threats, beneath beds to quiet nightmares, above windows to shield against sorcery or winter winds, inside barns to bring good fortune during births of young animals. Elders taught that if you rested on new straw, your dreams would stay peaceful. If it rustled too loudly in the dark, something unwelcome might be close. Never burn the last harvest straw before the new year arrived. Trouble would rise with the flame. These teachings were survival wisdom, dressed as superstition. Fifth, burning straw is a sign of cleansing. During certain festivals, especially in winter, villagers gathered to set old straw alight. The ash was scattered on the soil to feed the land. The smoke was thought to pull sickness upward into the sky. The fire cut through the longest nights of the year. In some areas, people created a straw figure to burn at the end of the season, a ritual to push away disease, to remove old sorrow, and to honor those lost to the cold. This was not needless destruction. It was transformation. It was a release, a final show of thanks to the simple material that had kept them warm, protected their food, sheltered their children, and even cushioned the final moments of a life. Straw began out in the fields, but in time it found a place in the human heart. It became a quiet link between the daily struggle and the sacred, between the ordinary and the everlasting. As we move into the final chapters of this story, we return to the clever ways straw served as structure, design, and even an early form of insulation, long before modern builders understood it. Straw did more than keep people alive. It allowed them to create. When the winter chilled too deeply and the forest was too distant, peasants did not carve into stone. They shaped shelter from the land itself. To many, straw appears weak, easily burned, easily crushed. To the farmers of the past, it was a foundation. Without funds for lumber, without bricks, without metal nails or strong tools, they turned to the stalks left after reaping. And from these stiff golden threads, they raised homes that endured rain and wind. Here is how it worked. Wattle and daub, weaving walls from straw with flexible branches. The house most peasants lived in was made with wattle and daub construction. Wattle was a basket, like weave of thin bendable sticks, usually from willow or hazel. Daub was a thick mixture of clay, dirt, straw, and the manure of animals. Inside that mixture, straw played the role of support. It kept the walls from splitting as they dried. It held the clay in place with a strength like iron bars inside concrete. Walls without straw fell apart. Walls with it held firm for many years. Peasants learned the pattern well. Soak the straw, mix with soil and dung, crush with bare feet, push into the woven frame. It slowly dried, hardened into a solid shell, and became the outer skin of a home. Straw for roofing. When rain came, the roof decided if life inside stayed safe or not. Without a proper roof, water turned living spaces muddy, snow crushed beams, and wind blew straight into the hearth. But well-made thatch, built from long, thick stalks, could remain strong for 20 to 50 years. They gathered wheat straw, tough and naturally coated with waxes. They used reed straw from riverbanks, which resisted water. They used rye and barley straw, softer and easier to shape. They stacked the bundles tightly from bottom to top, overlapping layer upon layer. Every layer guided rain downward. Every bundle held warmth inside. The result was a roof that resisted wet, held heat, and sighed softly in the breeze. That skill took practice and care, yet the material cost nothing. It came anew with every harvest, a gift repeated year after year. Buildings for animals and fields. Straw far beyond the living room. The work did not stop with houses. Straw built other structures. Animal homes lined with straw to keep chickens and goats warm. Barriers made of thick straw mats to guard crops from wind. light shelters in fields for workers during long days, warm storage rooms for supplies and newborn livestock. They even pressed wet straw into wooden molds to shape blocks. Once dried by the sun, those blocks could be piled into walls that muffled noise and held heat well. Straw as warmth, the first real heat shield. Today experts call it a barrier that slows the movement of temperature across space. Peasants simply called it practical living. Straw was tucked into attic spaces, pressed between the rafters. It was arranged behind wooden panels, wrapped in cloth, and tied around the door frames to stop the cold. During the colder months, they even packed straw between two layers of clay, forming a natural shield that held warmth inside. Some homes had raised floors filled with straw. Some beds used straw stuffed into wooden frames to keep heat trapped through the night. It was not advanced science. It was instinct, taught, remembered, shaped, and used again. And it worked. When houses were built and repaired, the advantage of straw construction was that it moved with the rhythm of the seasons. Gather straw in autumn, build or mend in early winter. Allow the walls to settle during the long cold. Survive storms beneath thatched roofs. Burn or return the old straw to the soil in spring. Begin the cycle again. Peasant homes were not meant to last like stone. They were living structures, renewed, repaired, and returned to the earth with every generation. Straw allowed peasants to build without cutting down entire forests. It allowed them to repair their homes without spending coins. And it gave them something many could not purchase, shelter they understood, shaped with their own hands. Now we will explore the skill and imagination that straw inspired, beyond shelter and beyond survival, as farmers turned it into tools, playthings, art, and trade. Without money for metal goods, without fine cloth or carved timber, they turned straw into the things they needed most, shaped with patience and long practice. Let us step into their world of rural craft. Baskets, mats, and daily tools shaped from twisted straw. Peasants braided straw into storage baskets for food, seeds, and fire starting. Flat mats for sitting, resting, or drying herbs. Straps and ropes pulled tight for work, animal collars, leads, and harnesses. These objects were not luxurious, but they were sturdy, light, and easy to replace. Toys for children made from the leftovers of the harvest. Through this, it became a quiet form of speech, spoken through rough hands, heard in the soft groan of a basket, felt in the gentle warmth of the straw-filled bed. In minutes, a single house could be swallowed. In hours, an entire settlement could be lost. If not consumed by fire, straw could decay, especially when roofs leaked, walls shifted, or animals slept indoors. Cold seasons brought moist air, decay brought mold, and mold brought sickness. Children who slept on decayed straw often developed coughs, skin irritation, or rising fever. Bread stored in damp straw tasted sour, grain spoiled, food became dangerous. To prevent this, peasants replaced straw often, dried piles in the sunlight, and smoked rooms to remove moisture.